Hey guys, Enigmatic Mr. L here. I recently made a video going over the Fire Emblem Lords, what I think of them as characters, not looking at how they are as units. This time I'm going to be doing the opposite, looking at how they perform in gameplay without factoring in how well written they are as characters or how not well written they are, lack thereof. A couple things to go over first. First and foremost, with characters, you can just kind of combine sequels and remakes into one. This time, not so much. How a unit performs from one game and its remake or like its sequel can vary quite a bit. So I have some characters on here multiple times. Like Marth is on here 5 times. Second of all, while it's difficult to look at characters within the same game, how they perform, I would say it's almost impossible to look at characters from one game versus another game. That's really going to like apples versus oranges. I imagine there'll be a little discourse like, hey, character in B should have moved up or down a tier. And especially within the tiers themselves, I imagine a lot of people will be thinking X unit should move up, Y unit should move down. And that's fair. That's totally valid. With that out of the way, let's just get on with the list, starting with the very first game, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon: The Blade of Light, and its version of Marth. Marth, I would say, is very good in this game. I would say this is the best performance Marth has ever had. A lot of the mechanics in general of FE1 help Marth out quite a bit. Besides HP, stat caps are 20 across the board, and moreover, stat boosting items, usually in most games, are like +2 to a stat. This game, they're like +5. They're very potent. So a commonly stated strategy is to just give all of your stat boosters to Marth, make him have cap stats across the board, or very close to cap stats, and just let him not quite solo, but like semi-solo everything, relying on like the Cavaliers or Flyers for help here and there. He has quite a few tools at disposal. Obviously, the Rapier is pretty good. I think you can end up buying it at a shop later to get even more. Helps with a lot of bosses. Helps with a lot of like the cavalry units, enemies. Beyond that, in this game, Mercurius is a personal weapon. He's the only one who can use it. Falchion is very good in this game. It seals non-adjacent attacks besides it seals adjacent attacks besides magic, even though you barely have time to use it. And it's very effective at taking down Medius, the final boss. Like if you get lucky with like doubling him, like double crits, you can just one round him. There's also the fact that Marth just has aggro utility in this game. If an enemy can target Marth, they will. So that makes it very good for, keeping them away from your squishy healers or whatnot. Often what I should do is just kind of, put all that stat boosts into Marth. In a lot of other games, like, say, like Binding Blade or Thracia 776, strategy is to, like, warp boss killer, warp lord, kill boss, seize with lord. This game you should do 2 for 1. Warp Marth over, kill boss, and then have him seize as well. Probably the best unit, I would say, in his respective game. Then we move on to Gaiden with its version of Alm. Alm, I would say, is very good in this game. He has pretty strong base stats. So, like starting out, him and Lucas are going to be moving most of your heavy hitting. He does fall off a bit in like part 3 as your other units like getting like promotions, like their 2nd or 3rd tier class. He has to wait till part 4 to promote. That does kind of hold him back a little bit. But then once he gets his part 4 promotion, he gets a huge boost of power again, continues to dominate. If it weren't for how the fact he falls off a little bit in Act 3, I'd probably put him here, but I think like high A is fair. Celica is pretty good, just a solid support unit. She always has something to do, whether it's healing with white magic or, attacking monsters with fire magic. And Fire Emblem Gaiden especially, there's never a point where like magic isn't useful. So solid access to 1-2 range and can help with like good use of various rings. Not amazing. I'd say she likes to fear like combat potential of all, but she's pretty good on her route. Never like upset to have her. She always finds some way to contribute. Pretty good. Next we move to Mystery of the Emblem, Book 1 and 2. I believe this is Book 1. This is Book 2. Both of these units are pretty good. I would say that Book 2 is better. It's just same growth rates across the board, but Book 2, Marth has slightly higher base stats. He loses out on a few of his tools compared to Shadow Dragon: The Blade of Light, which knocks him down a little bit. He doesn't have like his aggro utility. Enemies always target him. Mercurius isn't a personal weapon anymore, but this was the game that introduced dismounting penalties, so while other maps, if you're not just warp skipping them, your cavalry units like dominate in Shadow Dragon: Blade of Light. Here, he does shine more. He like outperforms them, even if you're not warp skipping. At least before outperforms the cavalry units, mounted units. So that is something. solid, good unit across the board. Not quite, I'd say, on his Shadow Dragon Blade of Light form. Next up, we have Sigurd from Genealogy of the Holy War, the protagonist of Generation 1. Let's put him where he belongs. S tier, top of S tier. He has everything you'd want in a unit. Amazing base stats. Pretty much right other units that have to like gang up on enemies. Like Alec and always have to team up to defeat an enemy. Sigurd just one-ran them all. Then at the end of the prologue, he gets the Silver Sword, grows even stronger. Has a mount in a game like the largest maps in the series, dominated by mount. He only has one skill in Pursuit, but it's all he needs. That's by far and away the best skill in the game. He's the only unit that can like kill the boss and seize in the same turn. So a lot of times the most powerful tools in the game, just like the rings, they end up falling in Sigurd's lap. Just gets even stronger as the game goes on. His speed growth is a little bit lacking. I think it's like 30 or 35%, but axes and lances are extremely heavy in this game, so even just with a silver sword, he'll usually continue on to keep doubling. Only bad thing about Sigurd is that this is a game, like I said, javelins, lances weigh a ton, so you can equip him with a javelin for 1-2 range, but he's almost never going to double with it. He can like chip at enemies on enemy phase with a javelin, or just with a silver sword, and he only gets to combat enemies at 1 range. You kind of have to pick your battles, but that's a pretty minor complaint. I would still say everyone knows how great Sigurd is. Then we get to his son Seliph, the protagonist of the second generation. The meta strat, as far as I can tell, and how I've always played Genealogy of the Holy War, my like 5 or so playthroughs of it, is to have Seliph inherit a bunch of rings from his father and the Paragon Band. Have him basically solo generation or Chapter 6. Then by the time he's like done clearing out the arena at the start of Chapter 7, he's already promoted, so he can catch up to Seliph, or catch up to his father Sigurd. At that point, I'd say even surpasses him because he got all the rings right away, and he has like a sword probably with like 50 kills on it, or close to 50 kills on it. He can start getting like crit potential. Actually has a res stat, unlike Sigurd, thanks to his mother Deirdre. But that is quite a bit of investment to catch him up. I could see what some people say that borders on favoritism. If you don't do that, he's still good. Maybe like even down near an A. Even though I do think that is kind of the recommended strategy to make the game easier, because you really want your protagonist on a mountain unit horse to be able to seize castles faster. That huge amount of investment, opposed to like Sigurd just starting out with great base stats on a mount. He's great, but this is a little bit of apples and oranges because they're in protagonists of different generations. I would say he requires a bit more work to get going than Sigurd. Just starts out strong, just raring to go. Next, we look at Leif, the protagonist of Thracia 776. Leif is like the epitome of a support utility unit. His stats, base stats, growth rates, and like promotion gains are all just kind of, they're not really particularly good. Even a game like Thracia 776, where outside of HP, stat caps are 20. But I mean, he can still do some combat. He's a good candidate, I would say, of like the speed ring you get early on, because most of your other units at that point, they're either doubling or they're so slow the speed ring isn't going to help them. Also, a fairly good candidate for like the, I think, like life ring you get, plus 7 HP. This allows him to do some solid combat during the Manister section. Very good personal weapon, light brand, 1-2 range, can heal HP, attack on magic, plus 10 luck. And he supports a good amount of the cast, a huge amount of support. Some of them are really good, like Nana, Finn, Aspel. So being within 3 spaces of them grants them plus 10 hit and avoid. That's pretty good. And he's the only unit in the title game that's available from start to finish. Other Fire Emblem games are not too impressive, but your party changes, you lose a lot of it, you go into the Master section, and even after that, other party members can get fatigued, you don't have them all around. Leif's, even if it's just a little bit, he'll contribute in like every map, at least to some little extent, which is more than what you can say for other characters. If you're playing more slowly and casually, what you can do is like have him absorb ballista hits, so you can deplete them of uses without fatiguing out your other party members. Like I said, combat still leaves a lot to be desired. He's not going to be performing as well as combat as some of your other units, but he's always helpful, I would say. Next, we have Roy from the Binding Blade. Everyone knows Roy is not great. Now, how bad depends on who you ask. Either kind of like, hey, he's all right, he's okay, or not good. He's useful, I would say, in the first few chapters. There are like some decent number of excellent enemies he has weapon triangle advantage against. And he continues to shine even like up to like the Western Alear, because there's still a lot of axe-wielding enemies. His Rapier is also situationally useful in the first few chapters, especially against some of the bosses. That's good. Then after that, after like chapters like, once you get like chapter 12 or something, Your other units start like getting their promotions. They get to a higher tier class, huge stat boost, continue to grow levels after that, and Roy just kind of becomes a liability. Like, it's hard to see him get combat to level him up. You mostly just have someone else kind of rescue him, take him to the throne where he's like actively holding him back in speed and skill. He gets good again towards the end. The Binding Blade is a really good weapon, but at that point, you have plenty of other, you can start using freely your S rank weapons to like kill dragons, so he doesn't really have much to stand out. But just for his early game contributions, even if there wasn't F tier, I wouldn't put him there, but just because of how much he falls off a cliff during like mid to late game, he like barely does anything. I don't think I can give him higher than D tier, but some marginal, early game situational uses and some marginally in game situational useful. He's not terrible, I'd say. Unlike Lyn, who, like Lyn's never going to do much of anything. So he has good speed and good skill, but most of the enemies in her game, like they're weighed down, like steel weapons like. So generally speaking, most of your units are going to have enough speed to double. And the extra speed she gets, like beyond just doubling thresholds, it's not enough to be reliable dodge tank. Skill helps her hit her mark, but generally speaking, your other unit's going to have decent enough accuracy. Really poor base strength and defense, both in terms of like base stats and growth, struggles to deal meaningful damage, especially in this game where like effective damage, at least the North American version, is ×2 instead of ×3. There's that. She's in a game dominated by 1-2 range because Javelin hand axes gained like things like +10 hit from Binding Blade to Blazing Blade, and enemies no longer have a luck stat. So while other units are going out using javelins and hand axes, she never gets to use any of that. And there are a lot of lance-wielding enemies past like her prologue Lyn mode section. Some would say she can like do well in Lyn mode, and that's technically true. There are a lot of axe-wielding enemies, but especially on repeat playthroughs, you're playing like hard mode, you're much more better off just investing that EXP into other units like Kent, Sane, Florina. Even Urk, I would say, is a better investment target than her, so even Lyn mode doesn't really help her out that much. She's force deployed on a few maps, but those few maps, even if you train her up, she's still going to struggle to make reliable contributions. You're better off just, training units that are actually better for those other maps rather than just like forcing to train a really weak lord. And then those maps, it's relatively easier to keep her safe. Just, Roy has a few contributions. Lyn has almost next to nothing to offer. Next up, we have Eliwood, the true protagonist, not just the decoy protagonist from Blazing Blade. Not a particularly great lord, and I think like almost identical in stats to Roy, both like bases and growth, except like 1 point difference in con. In some ways, I'd say Roy's better. I can definitely see this being the case, because Roy does have like early game contributions. The Binding Blade is at least something, but I'm going to give the slight edge to Eliwood, just because I think he gets a lot more out of his promotion. Like, sure, Roy gets like the Binding Blade at the same time as promotion, but outside that weapon, he just gets a few mount stat increases. Eliwood at least gets a mount. High movement is really good. Access to lances, help against web triangle, and more importantly, access to javelins. 1-2 range in a game dominated by 1-2 range. How good Eliwood is varies a bit by mode. I would say he's better in Hector mode, ironically, than his own mode, because he has opportunity to promote sooner. Still, like, again, has a problem like Rapier is just ×2 instead of ×3. And while he's like, overall growth rates are good, they don't really specialize in anything, and his base stats are kind of lacking, hence why he's not higher. But I think he's one of those characters, like, if you choose to invest in him, not just sideline him, you do get something meaningful in return. Also has a fairly quick support build up with Hector to like help him out, a more competent unit. So I can definitely see this, but I'm going to say Eliwood is a little bit better. Next up, we have Hector. Hector's a good lord, has what you need. He has good strength, he has good defense, he has access to axes, giving him access to hand axes in a game dominated by 1-2 range. All of that's really good. His resistance is low, but, that can be patched up with a pure water. You generally speaking, don't fight too many mages. Speed is low, but like I said with Lyn, a lot of enemies weigh themselves down. He'll have generally enough speaking to double when he needs to. Accuracy can be a little bit shaky, but it's not too bad. The big things holding Hector back, bringing like higher, are one, he doesn't really have a mount. He's stuck at, I think it's like 5 movement. Even when he promotes, it doesn't do anything to fix his movement. He just gets access to swords, which is arguably even worse, promotion than Lyn. Eliwood's the only one that gets something like meaningful out of promotions compared to the 3. And he has really high constitution, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. Like, yeah, he's not going to get weighed down by weapons, but he's very difficult to rescue, especially like once he promotes, he gets more con. It can be more difficult to like rescue him, take him to seize points for like an early clear. That's something, but still, overall, he's at least good at combat. He's good at what he does. Next up, we have Eirika from the Sacred Stones. Eirika is similar to Lyn, that she specializes in speed and skill at the cost of strength and defense. And while Eirika, I would say, is not that great of a lord, I would at least say she's better than Lyn. Some would say that's just because her game is easier, but I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. There are a lot of route maps in her game, especially in like her route. And while there's some Blaze Blade, I think there's a lot more in Eirika's route. So she has the opportunity to contribute here and there, as opposed to just quick clear turns like C's. She can help, defeat enemies here and there. She gets a lot more of her promotion, which she's guaranteed to get. Whereas Lyn, there's a good probability you just like bench her and then just sell her like Heaven Seal for like extra gold. Even base Eirika, once she promotes with the Sig line, she can do at least like massive damage to monsters. And if you've like been investing into her, she's better still. She gets a mount on a promotion, which isn't as helpful as it sounds, because by the time she gets a mount, it's like, okay, what's chapter 17? An easily warp skip chapter. Chapter 19, easily warp skip chapter in like 2 or 3 turns. Chapter 20, easily warp skip, just, kill the boss and seize. Maybe even the same thing for endgame, but at least helpful, like with high movement in chapter 18. That's a chapter, at least to my knowledge, isn't easily warp skip, because it's a route map. Has opportunity to shine there. Better personal weapon, better promotion, more opportunity to shine. Still not great. That strength and speed, or strength and defense, leaves a lot to be desired. Hence why she's not higher, but she's alright. Her brother Ephraim is better in my opinion. About on par with Hector. I can really see either way. They're very similar to each other. Both have, solid strength. Ephraim's a little more speed focused. Hector's a little more defense focused. Both have access to hand axes. Javelins get access to 1-2 range. You could say that Ephraim's availability is shakier, especially if you discount Lyn mode. It's just kind of like prologue thing most players skip. Because even his own route, he's misses out in the first like 7 chapters, and Eirika route's shakier still, but I'm still going to give it to Ephraim just a little bit. He has better resistance, which is something. Speed, I would say, even though Hector generally is going to have prop doubling, speed's probably more useful than defense. And he gets like the personal weapon, Sigmund. He gets more time to use it as opposed to Armen's, and it's generally more useful. Plus, he gets a mount on promotion, which, like I said with Eirika, a lot of chapters easily warp skipped, but that's still something. I can see this, but very similar lords. They're good, not amazing, but they're good, solid. Ike from Path of Radiance, depending on who you ask, I would say he's either like Roy, but not bad, or like Roy and not as bad. Now, they are similar. They're both like lords, kind of mediocre starts, maybe kind of solid growths, I would guess, but they're in a game dominated by mounted movement. They have a late promotion. They get a really cool sword, like 1-2 range, but they only have like 2 or 3 chapters to use it. But I think once you start getting into the details, you find, at the very least, I would say at least, Ike outperforms Roy. Like, the Binding Blade only has 20 uses, and yeah, you can use the Hammer's Staff to repair it. That's what I do, because I just like having my Roy go to town when he has a chance to use it, but many players probably use the Hammer's Staff on like warp skipping. Whereas Ike's Ragnail, even though he only has it for like 2 maps, it's at least infinite durability. Roy, you need him to land the final blow in the final boss, but that can be easily even like an untrained Roy. If you have like Percival or someone chip the boss down, then Roy can finish it off. Ike is one of their best candidates for taking down Ashnard. Like, yeah, you have Idna and Nasir, but especially if you go Wrath Resolve, he's the best candidate to go 1v1 against Ashnard. And while Roy promotes, maybe he promotes is okay, there's like 1 chapter left, you're not getting the best, getting 3 chapters otherwise. Ike promotes at the end of chapter 17, at the start of chapter 18, so he has quite a few time to make good use of his like getting to get level ups again. And even though I would say Ether probably isn't the best long term, I think it'd be good just short term skill before you end up replacing him with like Wrath and Resolve. It can help him out a lot in combat. The one thing I would say Roy has over Ike is that Ike's game is much more dominated by javelins and hand axes 1-2 range as opposed to Roy, because in this game kind of have shaky accuracy. Enemies have, an actual luck stat, but even taking into fact, I think Ike's fine. He's like an investment project, but he's not great, at least not in this game. Some would say Path of Radiance, Elincia shouldn't really count here as a lord, and that's perfectly fair, but I mean, Even though she only joins for a few chapters, she's consistently a game over condition, unique class, royalty. Yeah, sure, I'll allow it. She's only around for like 3 chapters. She's around in Clash. The next chapter before you fight the Black Knight. Then I think she's absent before you can bring her to endgame. I think she's like unavailable for like the penultimate chapter. She doesn't really get a chance to do much. I would say just that limited availability, but feels kind of wrong making her the worst lord when it's debatable even if she is a lord. But even ignoring that, she has basically her personal weapon, which is effectively a brave sword, and an A rank in stabs with a decent magic stat. So she can use the rescue staff in like in game for some shenanigans here and there, or use like a physics staff or that fortify staff, whatever it is you get in that chapter where like the unarmed priest are A rank in stabs. Even though she only has like a few chapters, she can at least like contribute in those few chapters. Unlike Lynn, who has much more availability but struggles to make any meaningful contribution. So just above Lynn, I think that's fair. Micaiah, I should have done this. Gonna think of it. Anyway, Micaiah, she's pretty good, or she's all right, I would say. Very good magic, like an 80% magic growth, good res and skill, or res and luck. That's something. But if enemy so much as flicks her, she's gonna die. And leveling up, like trying to use the angelic robe on her, Draco shield, it really doesn't help it. At least in my experience in general, she's always gonna be frail. More so, it's like her lack of speed. She'll do reliable chip damage, but outside of maybe like an Armor Knight on normal mode, she's never going to double anything. So she'll hit the enemy hard once for big damage, but she doesn't finish them off. But that's still reliable chip damage, 1-2 range. That's something. Part 3, she gets like promoted and gains access to stabs. She has a utility role there. Part 1, sacrifice can be useful here and there. If you do invest into her, she'll gain a really high magic stat and a higher staff rank, which allows you when you get to the tower, you can do some things like in the first map, you can silence a few Siege Tome users. And part 3, you can have a good use like rescue boost to help like one clear that turn against the Digensia. That's something. But overall, very frail, like reliable chip damage, but doesn't really one-round enemies. You have to be very careful in like protecting her. I think like C tier is fine. Elincia in Radiant Dawn is a little bit better. Part 2, she doesn't get a chance to do much. She just kind of tickles enemies with her slim sword. The developers thought it'd be a funny joke, just give her a slim sword in her opening chapter. She just kind of tickles enemies till Har shows up, kills them. And then Elincia's Gambit, you send Har forward, clear that map in like 2 or 3 turns, or whatever it is. Then in part 4, she's like the leader of like 2 maps. She has a good amount of chance to contribute there, both in like staff utility and with like her personal weapon. That's something. If you bring her to like the tower, I would say she's the definition of like reasonable filler. Like she's already promoted in like the 3rd tier class. She can help with rescue, both like the staff and just rescue dropping as like a flying class, can help with general staff usage. That's something. Still fairly limited availability, and even during those maps, she's not like, say, Nalia, the Wolf Queen. She's only available in 4 maps as well before the tower, but she completely dominates. Elincia, she does nothing 2 of her chapters before the tower, and the other 2, she's helpful. Things like C tier is fine. Ike is much better in Radiant Dawn. He's got the strength, he's got the speed, he's got the defense. Very solid combat. Only really things holding it back are before he gets Ragnall, he lacks access to his reliable 1-2 range. And for a good while, especially before you get Ragnall, he's really outperformed by especially Har. Especially just rescue Har, give him like rescue and pass, take him to the seize point. There's that, but I wouldn't say he's quite on level of like dominant of these units, but he's very good. Then we get to Marth and Shadow Dragon and how the mighty have fallen. It's hard to say what the difference is here, because it's not just any one thing. It's like a combination of about 5 or so things that all add up, taken from like the best units game to like one of the strong contender for worst lord in the series, I would say. Not quite, but a very strong contender for it. He does have his thief utility. There's that, like the Fire Emblem. You can unlock chests. He visits villages. If you count that as like thief utility, get gold here and there, get some units. That's something. But this is a game, I'm going from like the original Shadow Dragon. I threw in the weapon triangle, which wasn't in the original game. So some say this is like the most like lance heavy game there is. Bard's constantly facing weapon triangle disadvantage. Beyond that, non HP stat caps are not 20 anymore, so you can't just like instantly max him up using like potent stat boosters, which I think go back to doing like +2 in this game. His lack of promotion hurts more in this game compared to the original. Other units are reclassing. Marth doesn't have that luxury. He doesn't have his aggro utility. There's that. Plus, a lot of these characters, even if they're not that great towards the end, like Eirika, Path of Radiance, they get the Ragnail, they get Sigline, something great. The Falchion, if you're playing anything more than like normal mode, if you try to use that against Medius, he'll just return the favor. And it goes from being a good way to like one round Medius to getting your Lord one rounded. There's that. Still, consistent thief utility. That is something. You can forge like the rapier to help you with some of the early game enemies, but it's not very cost effective. You're better off using that money for like the wing spear or something. There is a strategy you can do if you're just low manning it, like Marth, Sheeta, maybe a couple other units. Have them as high levels be intentionally kill off all of your other units, so the generic replacement units you get are higher level. That is something, but that's not a very quote-unquote like efficient way to play, but just for his minor contributions consistently as like thief utility, like a living chess key, / like village visitor, I think it's more than what these two are capable of. Marth, the new mystery, is a big improvement over his Shadow Dragon counterpart. They buffed his base stats and buffed his growth rates, and I don't think this game is quite as like lance heavy. Plus, in this game, towards the end of the game, he gains access to the Binding Shield, just +2 to all of his stats, which, especially if investing into him heavily, using him as a combat unit, that can really help him during the last few chapters. Still not amazing, definitely not as good as his Shadow Dragon Blade of Light performance. Probably not as good as Mystery Emblem, but he's solid, just like these two, but pretty solid unit overall. Kris is an amazing, bonkers, like growth unit. Just whatever class you want him in, he's going to excel at it. He's going to carry a lot during the mandatory prologue, which is basically just see how much EXP you can funnel into Kris as possible. And as long as you're not playing like 0% growth and continue to hold up over the entire course of the game, just very solid, bonkers growth unit. Might want to mention here that a lot of these avatar units, they do have like a male and female version. And you could kind of split the difference. Generally, I would say the female is better than the male. Maybe not in this game, but like female Robin gains access to Gale Force. Female Corrin gains access to Jacob earlier. Female Byleth gains access to Pegasus Knight over like War Master. Female Alear interacts with a few personal skills like Brisados and Gold Marys and Marins. And Louis a little bit better, but I don't think it's that much of a difference. It really just be the two gender lords right next to each other, so I think combining them into one is fair. Next up, we have Robin, an amazing growth unit. Can freely reclass like Kris, but unlike Kris, he can gain skills from them. Some really broken skill combinations like Vantage combined with Vengeance, gain Arms Thrift, so you can use really powerful forged weapons without breaking them. Life Taker to constantly heal up his HP. Of course, Gale Force. This is really gets into like what you value in it, because I think in terms of end game potential, he outperforms what we've seen so far. Just gaining all those skills once you reclass him a bunch, he's amazing. But his base stats, they're fine, but they're not like on the level of Sigurd's. You could say the same as Seliph, but one, I think it's fairly easy to get Seliph up to promotion for like the main part of the game as opposed to Robin. I think you have to work more for it. And if I did something like this, that would separate Sigurd from his son Seliph. So, of course, there's that. Chrom's pretty solid. Generally speaking, a lot say, I don't know about Lunatic, because I'm not too familiar with that, but in like hard mode, I'd say like the optimal strat is just Robin solo. Have Robin solo everything just with the Chrom backpack. Chrom can like help in the early game. Outside of resistance and magic, his growths are good across the board. But while Robin's doing most of the heavy lifting, Chrom just kind of acts as like a convoy. Some people have nicknamed him a Chromvoy, but I mean, that's still good. Good growth rates, should you choose to invest in him. Solid combat, useful early game, and a good backpack for Robin. I don't think he's like this, but I think like A tier is fine. Lucina is a character I'd say is very difficult to rank because she joins, and if you invest into her, she can get Gale Force, she can gain some amazing skills, she can reclass, but she joins at like level 10 about halfway through the game, so she does require a bit of like grinding investment to get going. Really comes down to how much are you willing to invest into her. I think like C tier is fine, kind of like with these units. She's a good project unit, she's a good growth unit. Should you choose an investor to get something amazing, but definitely requires less investment than like all these units up here. So I could see give or take a tier, but I say here's fine. Next up, we have Corrin, who is basically just Diet Robin. Just Robin, but just a little bit worse. Part of that due to the fact that Robin has access to all classes, excluding like gender locked ones at all times. Corrin, you have to pick one at the beginning. You can maybe get one or two others to like a marriage seal or friendship seal, but you can't gain access to like all skills as easily as Robin can. I think units and fates in general have like less HP. I think Robin's HP growth is like 20% higher by default, but that's just kind of fates in general. And fates in general toned a lot of things back. Like Gale Force isn't as powerful, Nosferatu tanking isn't as powerful, but still very solid unit. Right up there with Camilla, Rioma, and Azura. Solid combat stats. You do have even not as many options as Robin. You have like quite a few options for like good Corrin builds. So solid unit, I would say. As far as I can tell, I'm not super familiar with Gaiden, but he's like his Gaiden incarnation, just slightly better. Very dominant Act 1, basically the Jagan of his route, setting up kills for others while occasionally killing enemies if need be. Part 3, he starts to like fall off a little bit. Then he gets his promotion in Part 4, and gets a good stat boost. Unlike Gaiden, he has access to the Killer Bow once he promotes, even though you're probably using that on whatever villager you gave him to an archer. But you could trade around for like the Hunter's Volley. And he has access to the Royal Sword. I think it's like the double line combat art, which allows him to like strike twice consecutively. That's something. Still, just like Gaiden, held back by his Act 3 performance, which is why he's not S tier, but very solid. Same thing with Celica, just like her Gaiden incarnation, always helpful, never I would say amazing. Someone saw that, I did hear someone say that Celica is the best unit in her game, which I would say even in her own route, Leon with his Killer Bow access is outperforming her, Paul and Catcher outperforming her, but she's useful for that. She's always going to have utility if nothing else. Just like Gaiden Celica, she can heal, reliable 1-2 range, and just in general, Echoes gives you more tools at your disposals compared to the original through supports and weapon forging, so just a slightly better version, I'd say, than her Gaiden counterpart. Next up, we have Byleth, which is a very good unit. Doesn't quite do anything super broken. Like, solid base stats for the game, along with your lords. One of the few units capable of like taking like more than a single hit or two in maddening mode. Solid, respectable growth rates. Very useful personal skill, gaining extra EXP to adjacent units, like especially in maddening mode where EXP grows at a very slow rate. That's always useful. But I think the big thing holding say Byleth back from like S tier is just the fact that while your other units you can freely tutor them, get them into their classes, Byleth has more trouble doing that. As yes, you can do like instructions during your free time explorations, but those are very limited early on. And in addition to just reclassing into what you want Byleth in terms of like stats and skills, you might also be trying to get him into like say C armor just to recruit Ferdinand von Eir, so he has trouble getting everything he wants. Once part 2 opens up and you're like have much more activity points, there's not as much like competition, it's much easier there. But for the early game, he has trouble getting the skills and like certifications he wants compared to like your students, I would say. But overall, still a very solid unit. He enables the very easy, or relatively easy, I should say, clear in the Azure Moon version of a Hunting by Daybreak. So, I mean, for that alone, maybe, best unit in the game. But just in general, solid unit. Dimitri is very good, at least originally. He's a solid combat, gains like 20% extra EXP. For the first few chapters, like, he's solid, but then later on, once you get like A authority or so, he gets the broken combination of Battalion Wrath, Battalion Vantage, which everyone knows like what a combination that is to send him into a horde of like 20 enemies, watch him go to town. It's not perfect. It's not necessarily like Iron Man friendly because those 90-something% crit rates, eventually he's going to whiff one. He's not going to kill the enemy. Even though it's better than like Wrath Vantage combos, he doesn't need to be a low HP. If he like whiffs once or twice, he can still end up 9, or his battalion get depleted. That's something, but generally it's still a very reliable strategy. Only thing holding back Micaiah is like the first, like I said, like few chapters or so. He's good. Lacks anything really, I would say, broken. Claude is kind of like a similar boat. I would say better than Byleth because he can be tutored more easily. In some ways, he's better than Dimitri. Like looking at his banes and boons, uh, or Dimitri has a bane and axes, which hurts him as he's trying to go for Wyvern. Where conversely, Claude has a budding talent and axes. So you can get him into like warrior class to certify for a death blow. Talent in bows to get him like hit plus 20. And he has like a natural like Wyvern adjacent class. You don't have to like constantly tutor him into like flying. But he lacks anything really broken. I would say he's better than Byleth just because he's much easier to tutor, but not as good as the other two house leaders. Which brings us to Edelgard. If you've seen my video favorite, like ranking the Fire Emblem Lords by they are as characters, you know what I have to say about these two, but I'm going to try to not let that bias impact my decision. So in some ways, I would say Dimitri is better. He is the ultimate enemy phase units. Like I said, Battalion Wrath, Battalion Vantage, sit him into a horde of like 20 enemies, watch him go to town. But Edelgard, I think, is the ultimate player phase unit, especially in like the second half of the game, gets access to Raging Storm, just like one turn clear the maps before the enemy unit has a chance to retaliate. That's better than waiting for enemy phase. Overall, stat line is better, I would say, than Dimitri. She gains like 1 point of speed in the prologue, then I think like, or 2 points of attack. And then if she's like equipped with a light weapon like an iron sword, she has enough speed to not get doubled by Dimitri in like chapter 1 on Maddening. Good, solid, starting out solid in a heavy armor. So a little bit of investment, she get weight -3, which for the early game is just like +3 effective speed. Consider on the Pegasus Nightline if you want to like get a darting blow. And there's just the fact that her Banes and Boots are more impactful than, or better off than Dimitri. Like, having a Bane axe and bows hurts, but once you get up to like D or D plus or so, reclass to Archer, Master Hit plus 20, you don't need anymore. Versus axes is something you want more long term to get into Wyvern Lord. So I can see it either way. I definitely would say if we're talking about a maximum sweat, like hardcore, like LTC perspective, where there's a meaningful difference between 2 turn clearing the map and 3 turning, I would say Edelgard is better. But the reason I'm going to say give it the edge to Dimitri is just availability. Like, yeah, Dimitri turns to an edgy boy for like a few chapters. It can't be tutored, but Edelgard's route is shorter. And on top of that, there's a few prologues that are in Dimitri's route that aren't Edelgard's, or if they're in both routes, but Edelgard doesn't have access to, or she can't be deployed in them. She can't be deployed in like chapter 11 because she is the boss, which, okay, to be fair, that's just trivial like kill boss map. You can just warp anyone in to kill. But then you have like the turtle map, like Leone and Linhardt's paralogue. It's like, wow, I could really use a really strong lord here. Too bad I can't have Edelgard. A few more paralogues like Ferdinand and Lysithia's paralogue, Hilda and Serial's paralogue, Mercedes and Caspar's paralogue, Gilbert and Annette's paralogue. There's that, and just a few like longer campaign in general. I did hear someone say that, yeah, but Edelgard helps out in the Silver Snow route at the beginning. But if we're going by that route, Byleth just overtakes them all because he's moderately helpful in every route as opposed to Dimitri helpful in one route, Claude helpful in one route, Edelgard helpful in one route, kind of like 1.5. Byleth's useful in like all 4. I'm just looking at just like Crimson Flower versus Azure Moon. I think Dimitri takes it. And that was an overlong explanation just looking at comparing 2 characters to justify my love for Dimitri and hatred for Edelgard. And last but not least, we have Alear, which just like a lot of these units in the B tier, I think it's just a solid support utility unit. Can support every unit in the game, and support bonuses in this game are adjacent allies only. And if you're adjacent to Alear, you get the effect of their personal skill, divinely inspiring, +3 true damage. So even if they would normally do 0 damage, even +10 more strength, they'll always do at least 3 damage, -1 damage taken, which is useful for the entire game. Unique access to like the Dragon class, beyond just one character you get later. Dragon interacts very well with a lot of emblems, a lot of additional support. Solid availability. Yeah, if you want to like reclass into combat, I think that you can like reclass into like Wolf Knight or something. But if you want to just have a support utility lord, I think like Dragon is fine. And that is the list. So just going over it in general. S tier units are like the cream of the crop. They're like the saviors of the run. They're among like the best of the best in their respective games. A are very solid, very good units. Have like one or two flaws, just enough to like hold them up from S tier, but still very good. B are solid, competent, or like support utility units. You're never upset to have them. They'll always find ways to contribute. C characters, like they're fine. They're solid like growth projects. They need a lot more investment to get going. And then D tiers, like their contributions are very minimal, require heavy investment to get going, just kind of nichely situational. Anyways, that is my list. As always, thank you so much for watching. Any characters you think I overrated, any characters you think I underrated, please let me know in the comments below. This is Enigmatic Mr. L, signing out.